And when I grew up, there was Keith Jackson. There was so many great commentators who all had their own unique style. Vince Scully, Jack Buck, all of these guys. And it's not that way anymore. And to understand the point I'd like to make about Wes, you have to understand a little bit about my background. When I've known I wanted to go into broadcasting since I was a kid. But I wanted to be the next David Letterman. But, I got into sports as Luongo tries to gain some of those penalty yards back, and he does, out to the 45. And here in Cleveland, you can get Ernie Harwell, who was the Detroit Tigers radio guy. We had Tom Hamilton and Herb Score here. I can't remember the guy who does Ohio State's games, but he's very good.
4-yard gain on the play.
Joe Tate, the Cleveland Cavaliers broadcaster. We got all the Chicago broadcasters on the radio here, and I just fell in love with it. And I knew that comedy probably wasn't going to be the right route. But I loved broadcasting, and I loved sports broadcasting. And Wes always kind of recognized that. And the clients that I work with for a long, long time, those are the guys who get that. And Wes, the first year I came back to South Carolina, it was 2 years ago. And Wes was kind of coaching, and Wes was doing a lot of other things. So he wasn't up in the booth with me like he was all last year. So Wes would go home after the game, and Wes would watch what I did to see what I was going to say. And he always would text me that evening when he was watching it. Say, man, that was so funny when you said A, B, and C, and that was so funny. And that just always meant the world to me.
Timeout called by Palmetto.
It really always meant the world to me when he would say that because when I was a kid and I wanted to go the route of comedy, I always really get a kick when somebody gets a laugh or a chuckle out of something I say. It means more to me than when somebody – I know I'm not a great football commentator. I think I do a decent enough job to cash the paycheck. But I know I'm not going to be Kevin Harlan. I know that. I understand that. I'm very much at peace with that. But when somebody says that they've enjoyed the broadcast and they got a kick out of something that I said, that means more to me than if I get a compliment about the play-by-play. It really does. And Wes always took time to do that. He knew. We never discussed this. He was always somebody who I think he was entertained by me, and I think that's why we had such a good working relationship. And the older that I get and the further we get separated from the Keith Jacksons of the world, from the Stuart Scotts of the world, from all of those great people who had their own unique way of doing things, and we get this younger generation who grows up not knowing that football used to be like that. There's no difference nowadays between Chris Fowler and Dave Pasch. They sound exactly the same. They are the exact same people. They might as well be out of a factory somewhere in Detroit, just ship out the next broadcaster to ESPN because they all sound the same. And they're fine. They're not bad. They're just corporate and they're bland, and I can't stand it. So anyways, Wes always got that about me, and I always loved him for that. Because more and more I'm getting newer clients who are younger, who, again, don't know what broadcasting used to be and who don't understand what I'm doing. So when I get a client who gets me, it's a rare thing. It's a special thing. It was a unique thing that Wes and I could share when he would go back and watch the games and razz me a little bit. Missed the guy. He was really special. Mistake there. Going to give Brevard the football back. A fumble and a rare mental error. It was recovered, by the way, by James McLean. I know he would have loved the Snoop Dogg comment earlier. I don't know if he would have been happy about it, but he would have loved it. Really, really one-of-a-kind guy.
All right, welcome back to halftime, everybody. And of course, we've been talking about this during the first half, but remembering our friend, in my case, a client, and in Reid's case, a partner and a friend, of course, Wes Dorton. Reid, thanks a lot. I know you guys are swamped, and giving us a few minutes of your time here at halftime, just to kind of remember our old pal. I was thinking when I moved back to Ohio, one of the things that I was going to miss is, being in the press box and making fun of, the Phenom gloves and having Wes whack me on the back of the head. That was going to be all gone for me anyways. And but this just added a whole nother layer of kind of sadness on my end. And I just wanted to bring you in, Reid, just kind of talk about how long did you know Wes, first of all?
I would say probably about 8 years. If I go back, it's been about 8 years. So it's
really,
a good amount of
when
time.
the cancer first started, you've kind of been there throughout that whole process with him.
Yeah, I had really got to know Wes about 8 years ago. We had been affiliated before that, but it was probably I got to know him just when he got diagnosed with cancer. So I've kind of been with him through that whole walk, really.
How did that friendship begin?
That friendship began with a group of guys that met every Wednesday morning at a place. I can't remember the name of it, but we met in Chapin every morning, and we would just pick each other up. It was a group of guys. We called ourselves the Band of Brothers. And there was probably about 10 guys, maybe a little less. And so each week, every Wednesday, we just have a topic of discussion and, chew the fat, enjoy each other's company, and lift each other up, based on what we were all going through. We were just very, very close-knit group of guys.
Just kind of fast forwarding a little bit, we'll go back as well. When you and I had that initial conversation, I don't know days, I'm sure for you too. I can't remember the days exactly, but whenever we first started talking about Wes passing, I remember that you had mentioned that you and he kind of had that same mindset when it came to Palmetto Prep. So I'm just kind of curious how that happened. I know Wes took over from another owner when it was Gray Military Academy, and then Wes was running the show, and then you got involved. Just kind of take us through that.
Sure. As a result of that relationship on Wednesdays, we started to define a little bit more one-on-one, and Wes found out that I was a football knucklehead just as he was. And we chatted more, and he asked me if I would be so kind to become part of the board of directors, of which I did that in 2016. And so I became a board of the directors, and then eventually became the president of the board, I think in 2018, somewhere around there. And the reason why I did so is, it's one thing to become on a board of directors, but the vision and the dreams of what Wes had laid out with this program, it changed significantly from Gray Military Academy to a more of a prep school, where he was taking boys out of high school would get a second chance that didn't get a draft for whatever reason, whether it was their grades, whether they didn't get the exposure, and he would bring them into Palmetto Prep, recruit them, coach them up, develop them into young men, get their grades up, and then focus on placement into a college. Maybe sometimes not of their choice, but definitely a D1 school that was looking for a high-range player. And I'll say this, because of Wes's dedication and his heartfelt to these boys, that ratio was 92% we were placing these kids. And what got me focused on this was Wes and I have the same vision. I might do the same things that he does, but that vision, the dreams that he had, it's just remarkable, Chris, to look at that and say, we can change these boys' lives and give them a second chance. And I mean, it's just an awesome vision.
you know, I wanted to share one story, and then maybe you'll share a story that kind of encapsulates that. You know, Wes and I had many conversations, but I think it was when the three of us were in Brevard last year. And, you know, I've gone on tangents about this on these broadcasts all the time. You know, when you drop your kid off at one of these, especially these post grads, you can't automatically assume that they care about that kid at all. You just can't make that assumption. It's a predatory area of athletics in some cases. But one of the things that stuck out was that conversation we were having, and I can't remember how it came up, but Wes was talking about, you know, if a kid gets hurt, in some cases he's spending the night in the hospital with them. And I said, Wes, you know, I don't think that's, you know, something you're obligated to do. He said, look, Chris, these kids, you know, they get some local, you know, you guys do a nice job getting some local talent and everything, but you know, some of these kids don't have anybody. They're coming from Florida, or they're coming from Buffalo, or wherever they might be coming from, and you know, that person has to be Wes. And he took that very seriously, and he took that as a badge of honor, I think, too.
Yes, he did. In fact, I think it might have been that same game, or it was another one that I went with him, and one of the players did get hurt.
Yep.
And Wes and I got in the vehicle, got the boy in the vehicle, and off to the emergency room we went, and we stayed there until his parents got there. It happened to be his parents were somewhat local, but Wes and I were in that room with him prior to his parents getting there because they had to drive up. But you're absolutely right. He did it all the time, and one of the things that he did is he always rented a SUV or a Suburban so that he could, you know, if the boy hurt his knee, they could lay down in this vehicle. But that was the whole reason why he would drive up outside the bus and have his own vehicle so that he could take the boy over to the emergency room for care, and he would stay there so he didn't have to ride the bus.
He was one of the kind. You know, like I said, when we talked, I don't work with everybody at this stage of my life anymore. I've gotten more picky when I probably shouldn't in terms of income, but I've gotten far more picky because I want to work with people who care. And Wes was definitely one of those guys. Do you have anything, any fun stories about Wes? Anything you want to tell folks about Wes before we wrap this up, Reid?
Yeah, well, Wes had a real sense of humor. He was able to enlighten a table of those people around him by feeling out those individuals and just doing some goofy stuff. He was just good at it. You would think he'd be all straight and narrow, but in a general context, he really could lighten up a table. And one of the things that I'll have to tell you is the group of men that we had around one table were discussing some life applications, and Wes nailed it. He said, guys, I want to remind you, and then he laid out practical applications that every man can live their life to, and we were stunned. I wish I could have had it recorded because it was the best 10 minutes that I've heard him talk. And you know how his voice went, so you had to really keen in, but it was fantastic. Every single one of us around that table was stunned. He just really sold it out. It was fantastic. And Wes had the ability to do that at any time.
Yeah, he could really grab a room if he wanted to. That was something he can do. Reid, I want to thank you and everything you guys are doing. Behind the scenes, folks, it's crazy. And these folks are working very hard for your kids, if you're a parent watching, and for your family or your friend or whoever it might be. Those guys are working extra hard. So, Reid, thanks for giving us a couple of your time, a couple minutes of your time, excuse me. And gonna miss the old guy. It's not gonna be the same, but we power through.
Absolutely. He's still in our hearts, Chris.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll carry that vision on too. I wore my Warren Zevon shirt, you know, and enjoy every sandwich.
I see that.
One of his last phrases, one of his last great phrases when he was on Letterman, and I thought it was maybe appropriate today. So anyways, Reid, thanks so much. We'll take a break, folks. We got the second half coming up here in just a moment. Stay with us.